Every heart has its own rhythm. Melissa Goodwin only joined the school band because her best friend Olivia begged her to. But to her surprise, quiet Melly loves playing the drums. It's the only time in her life she doesn't feel like a mouse. Now she and Olivia are about to spend the next 2 weeks at Camp Rockaway, jamming under the stars in the Michigan woods. But the day before they leave, Melly's parents share major news. They're getting divorced. Miles from home, Melly's life is thrown further out of sync when she meets her new bandmate, Adeline. With her sandpaper voice and a beat-up guitar, Adeline helps Melly feel confident when Melly feels anything but. And at night, when the girls in her tent compare crushes, Melly finds she isn't thinking about boys. She's thinking about Adeline. To top it all off, Melly and Olivia seem to be growing apart, and Melly's not sure she has what it takes to be a real rock and roll drummer. Will she be able to make music from all the noise in her heart? Here is a preview of Drum Roll Please by Lisa Jenn Bigelow. The Camp Rockaway brochure promised every kid was a rock star waiting to happen, but they never met me. We hadn't even arrived, and I was ready to turn around and go home. My heart beat faster and faster, like the world's worst metronome, until it froze, until I couldn't feel or think or breathe. Then, just when it felt like nothing but a jumble of clockwork bits, it stuttered to life again. Mom's car zipped along the highway. Billboards dwindled by the minute, farmland giving away to forest the farther north we went. In the back seat, my best friend, Olivia, leaned over and whispered, for what had to be the 5th time, "Are you sure you're okay?" I shrugged. I hadn't cried in over an hour. That had to count for something, right? She squeezed my hand. "You're going to get through this. Only 2 weeks, and I'll be with you the whole time. We'll rock so hard you'll forget the rest of the world exists." I nodded. I couldn't expect Olivia to understand. She wasn't the one who'd woken up yesterday to the sweet smell of Dad's homemade waffles and fresh squeezed orange juice, like it was somebody's birthday, except it wasn't, which should have tipped me off. She wasn't the one whose parents had at the end of breakfast announced, "We've decided we're better off apart." She hadn't shuffled like a zombie through the past 24 hours as Mom took her shopping for a new swimsuit and Dad scanned apartment listings on his phone. It wasn't the next 2 weeks I was worried about. It was the rest of my life. I knew Olivia had more to say, but we couldn't talk about anything important on the ride because Mom was right there. Instead, we sang along to the radio and talked about music. Which is to say, Olivia talked. She always knew who'd put out a new album, who was dating whom, who'd trashed a hotel room, who'd checked into rehab. She sucked up gossip like a sponge. I only half heard what she was saying, my eyes stuck on the empty seat next to Mom. Dad was supposed to be there, singing "Crazy on You" in an off-key falsetto and passing around the road atlas to see who could find the funniest town names. Sweet Lips, Tennessee, or Elephant Butt, New Mexico. Instead, he was back in Kalamazoo, looking for a new place to live. The scenery along the highway faded, and I was back in the kitchen, morning sun streaming through the window. I dropped my fork with a clatter, and it lay dripping syrup on the white tile floor. My tuxedo cat, Mackie, looked at it cautiously. "We both love you very much," Mom said as I stared. "We want you to know you absolutely did not do anything wrong." I knew that. But you don't just wake up and say, "Good morning, honey. Let's eat waffles and get divorced." It's not like I was expecting a drum roll, but shouldn't there have been a sign something big was coming? Where had the arguments been? The screaming, the glares and cold shoulders, the signs that something was terribly wrong. I searched my memory and came up empty. The night before, they'd finished a crossword together. "But why?" I'd croaked. They'd exchanged a glance. Dad said, "It's because..." At the same time, Mom said, "That's not important right now, sweetie." And we listened to seconds tick by on the clock. The one shaped like a flying chicken, with fried eggs on the hands, that Dad picked out at the art fair one summer. He'd picked it out, but Mom had laughed too, imagining it on our wall. We'd laughed so hard. How could this be happening? And why the day before I left for camp? Maybe I shouldn't have been so surprised about that part. My parents always had the worst timing. Like when Dad told me Grandma Goodwin was in the hospital with a fractured hip 10 minutes before my pre-algebra test. I got a D. I was so distracted. Or when I was 6 and Mom slipped the truth about Santa on Christmas Eve. I cried myself to sleep and refused to open my presents in the morning. They sat wrapped under the tree until December 26. I couldn't believe they expected me to pack my suitcase as if everything were normal. But Mom said, "Trust me, Melly Mouse, by the time you're back home, the news will have sunk in and we'll all be ready to talk calmly and rationally about what this means for the future." Calm and rational, like this conversation? She was like a newscaster reporting a devastating earthquake. The entire studio could be crashing down around our heads, and she'd read the headlines in a pleasant voice, ignoring the dust and debris raining on her suit. At least Dad looked sorry, every bit of him drooping, from his round shoulders to his black mustache. I knocked back my chair, sending Mackie skittering from the room, and stumbled, blind with tears, to the basement where my drums were. I played as hard and fast as I could, all the loudest, most likely to aggravate my parents' songs Olivia had loaded onto my phone. My right foot on the bass drum was the boom of thunder. The hi-hat sizzled like lightning. My sticks rolled across the toms like rain on the roof, clattered across the cymbals like hail on the window. For a wonderful time, the rest of the world was washed away. There was only music, with me in the eye of the storm. But in the end, when my phone died and my arms grew sore and I really had to pee, I'd had to climb those stairs again. Quietly, I packed my suitcase. Without drums, Melly Mouse was just that, a mouse. And now, like it or not, I was on my way to camp. And this has been a preview of Drum Roll, Please.